You special. Your mama's a no-account fool. Daddy, too. But you ain't gonna be. One day, everybody gonna know your name.
James Brown.
So you want to be a singer?
Oh, no, sir. What I really want to be? Mechanic.
You got a problem?
You do music?
The only thing keep me sane in here.
He's a showstopper. It's a miracle.
Really? Maybe me and you could work on a little harmony together.
Sarah, get down here.
She coming, Mama. She coming. Look at these people, James. When is it gonna be when we up there?
We'll be back in 10. Right now.
What?
1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, get up.
What's wrong, Miss Hill?
You can't play that like you told us. Doesn't work musically.
Doesn't sound good.
Get up.
Doesn't feel good.
Get up.
If it sound good and it feel good, then it's musical.
You're entering a game here where the rules are already set out.
I'm just a street kid from Augusta, Georgia. Now, tell me what you see. Mr. President, I want to go to Vietnam. We got to bring a super heavy funk to the cats over there. Are they shooting at us? They trying to kill James Brown today. You want to go down and hit you as the man that killed the funk? Ah!
There's a woman here. She say she your mama.
My baby playing at the Apollo.
I ain't your baby. Not then, not now. I look after James Brown.
I knew that I wouldn't.
No one else helped me.
I knew that I wouldn't.
No one else.
I got it here.
When I hit that stage, you people better be ready. Especially the white folk. Hit it!
Every man in this band walk taller because they with James Brown.
Are we done, Mr. Bird?
I'm afraid not, Mr. Brown.
I say, are we done?
I think we got more funk in the trunk.
The star of the show. Hard-working.
Open up your ears.
Mr. Dynamite.
Man's a genius.
James Brown.
Good God.
Get up.
Get on up.
Fellas, I'm ready to get up and do my thing. I want to get into it, man, you know. Like a sex machine, man. Moving, doing it, you know. Can I count it off?
Hey everybody, I'm G. Baldwin, and I had a chance to check out the movie, Get On Up, the James Brown story. And I have to admit, this is a very good movie, but it had the potential to be great. Chadwick Boseman does a phenomenal job playing James Brown, aka the Godfather of Soul, Mr. Dynamite, the hardest man in show business, whatever name you want to call him. It features Nelson Ellis, who plays Bobby Bird, which was the original Hype Man, Jill Scott, who plays Deidre Robinson, and Craig Robinson, who, for all intents and purposes, really, I have no idea why they did this, but he plays Maceo Parker. Like I said, it's a very good movie, but it's not great. And after all, this is a docudrama and not a documentary. Now you may say, well, what's the difference between a docudrama and a documentary? It's a biopic, so it's all true, right? No. A documentary actually has interviews with the subject, which in this case would be the Godfather, James Brown, as well as various archival footage and, of course, interviews with people that work with him. A docudrama pretty much is somebody's life story where various events have either been omitted or have been hyped up for dramatic effect. Now, you may say, okay, well, what was hyped up for dramatic effect? Well, first of all, let's start with the casting. Chadwick Boseman, phenomenal job. He'll probably get an Academy Award nod for playing James Brown. He may not look like James Brown, but he sounds like him. He even dances like him. And Chadwick Boseman is a thespian. I understand he's not a professional dancer, and the choreographer who actually taught him to dance like the Godfather said he was quite impressed. Like I said, Jill Scott plays Deidre Robinson, and I was under the impression when I first saw the trailers for this movie that Jill Scott, because of her build and because of her hairstyle, she was actually playing the Godfather's third wife, which was Adrian Rodriguez. Now, if you know anything about The Godfather in the 80s, he had a lot of legal woes. He was on the decline, but of course he would eventually make his comeback. But during the time of his legal woes with the law, he also had domestic violence issues. And his wife at the time, Miss Adriana Rodriguez, her picture was placed all over the newspapers, and she would show her injuries that the Godfather, inflicted upon her. We saw her black eyes. We saw her bruised arms. I mean, the pictures that ran the magazines were really, really ugly. But, like I said, when a man has cocaine issues, he has legal woes, things happen. And like I said, by no means was the Godfather perfect. If you look at Deidre Brown, she's a little shorter, she's a little bit more fuller, so yes, but back in the days, in the 70s, she was not as healthy. So like I said, I was under the impression that she was playing Adriana Rodriguez and not Deidre Brown. Craig Robinson, for all intents and purposes, is a funny comedian. He's a heck of a thespian, and he plays Maceo Parker, who was the Godfather's prominent saxophonist. Now, you may say, well, Maceo Parker. Yes, if you listen to Godfather's song, he'll always say Maceo. If you hear Papa's Got a Brand New Bag, that saxophone solo, that's Maceo Parker playing that. Now, in real life, if you've seen the real Maceo Parker, and I've been blessed to see Maceo Parker live and in person, he's an average-sized man, very dark-skinned, and you look at Craig Robinson is pretty tall and pretty healthy, and he looks nothing like Maceo Parker. Craig Robinson's about a light brown-skinned man. So why they made him play Maceo Parker is beyond me. And I know Mick Jagger, who was an executive producer of this movie, I know he meant well. He says that The Godfather is his number one influence. Brian Glazier, heck of a film producer, produced my favorite show, 24. I know they meant well, but I have to say they made some questionable choices when it came to casting. Another thing about this movie, like I said, the docudrama where things are either skimmed over or they're played for dramatic effect. In real life, we see where Maceo Parker confronts the Godfather about money and royalties. Well, in real life, Fred Wesley, who was the Godfather's trombonist, was the go-to guy. A lot of the guys knew they didn't want to talk to the Godfather, so they would talk to Fred Wesley. Fred Wesley would talk to the Godfather about money, and pretty much those situations would be resolved. But in real life, when Fred Wesley actually confronted the Godfather actually fired him. But because they couldn't get a trombonist at the said time, pretty much Fred Wesley just stayed aboard. So technically, he was fired, but as we all know, he was on those records. Another thing this movie didn't cover is two things I was kind of concerned about. And like I said, this is a docudrama. I guess they just couldn't put all this stuff in there. Two things were left out. Very important things. It starts off in the 80s with the Godfather is running from the law, from that infamous car chase. But in the 80s, as the Godfather was on his decline and he was having, the domestic violence issues with his third wife, he was also on the verge of making a comeback. As a matter of fact, he did a song with Full Force called Static.
Won't be no static.
Don't stop, none. Won't be none.
He actually sampled his own drum loop from the funky drummer, Clyde Stubblefield, and did the song with Full Force. Well, as a result, as we all know, if it wasn't for the Godfather, there'd be no funk, soul, definitely be no hip-hop. And let's be for real, so many hip-hop artists from the 80s. Public Enemy, Big Daddy Kane, Rakim, up to the 90s, Das Effects, EPFMD, up until now, people like P. Diddy and J-Lo have sampled his music. Well, at the time where all these rappers were sampling his music, the Godfather wasn't getting paid. And it wasn't until he got with Full Force that he was actually able to sample his own music, that his lawyers and his managers actually sued the record companies and were able to get the Godfather all the monies that were due to him. So that's the reason why the Godfather became rich. Because of the Godfather, sampling is now a legal issue. Now, back in the day, you could sample all the music you want, but nobody got paid. But because of The Godfather, sampling is now a legal issue. If you sample somebody's music, you now have to get a certain license, and you have to pay a fee for that music. Up until that time, people were sampling The Godfather's music, and he wasn't getting paid. It wasn't until after the song Static, which was released in 1988, that The Godfather's managers and lawyers went after all the people that sampled The Godfather's music, that he was actually able to get the money that was owed to him. As a result, a lot of other artists, and particularly Rick James and George Clinton, would start to get paid from people sampling their music. And that wasn't covered in the movie, which I thought was kind of disturbing. Another thing, too, is that when you look at when you look at all the other historical aspects of the Godfather's life, so many things were omitted, so many things were skimmed over. When we first see the Godfather and he meets Bobby Bird at Reform School, they perform, he becomes part of the gospel band, the gospel group, and then they decide to do secular music. Well, when they're in the juke joint and they first see the artist Little Richard, he's singing a song, they decide to go on stage after Little Richard takes his break, and they do their cover of Cow Doggy. Little Richard hears a song, sees what's going on, and then asks James Brown what's his name. And of course, from what you see, it's like, okay. But in real life, Little Richard and James Brown were friends. And because Little Richard was so impressed by James Brown's, musical talent, he actually introduced him to his manager, which actually, got James Brown signed to the record company, which was Sun Records. But then, of course, he started recording for King Records. So I thought that could have been made a little bit more clearer. The other thing is, too, like I said, various people throughout his lives came and went. We see one part where he's in Paris doing the Olympia Live Paris show, which if you've seen the real life show, it's phenomenal. If you go on YouTube and get clips of it, it's just like, wow. Well, up until that point, a lot of his important band members left the band. Maceo Parker left in 1970 to form his own group called Maceo and the Macs. This would be Bobby Bird's very last show because there was just so much tension going on that he would leave and he wouldn't come back for a set amount of years. And around this time, too, in the 70s, the Godfather actually had his own record label called People Records. Now, if you're fortunate enough to find People Records, you'll find various people from James Brown Camp recorded under this record label. Maceo Parker, Fred Wesley, Lynn Collins, Vicki Anderson, and there's even old hype man Bobby Bird actually did a song, I Know You Got Soul, which was mentioned just once or twice throughout the movie. But again, like I said, you look at this, they say that James Brown was a astute businessman, but yet, like I said, the movie didn't feature any of the thing about him sampling, and it didn't feature the fact that he owned various radio stations, let alone had his own record label. So I have to really wonder, like, is this biopic, what was it really trying to do? Was it just showcasing how great he was in the 60s or 70s and accentuating some of the negative aspects? And then in the 80s, he just showed like how he just was in decline. And of course, near the end of his life, he just did all these various shows in Vegas and casinos. Because if that was the case, then maybe the movie shouldn't have been made. I know people are saying, what? Because of course, there's going to be people who will see this movie and say, it's all fact. It's a biopic. No. You have to do your research. Again, I know Brian Glazer and Mick Jagger meant well. Like I said, it's a good movie. It had the potential to be great. But like I said, when you're dealing with a figure like The Godfather, it's very, very hard to like take his life story and just cram it into like a 2-hour film. So out of 5 stars, I'll give this movie, say, 3.5 stars. I'm G. Baldwin, and thanks for listening.